So I want to kind of close with a quick story that shows the real value of it. Don't ever underestimate your influence on the positive long term. Because I'm convinced, too, that your commitment to safety, your ability to demonstrate that triangle with the character mentality and the results driven, it creates memories for people in your work environment. And here's how. In 1961, about 8 years before I was even born, my dad was a freshman in college at Newberry College. Okay, so, in the state of South Carolina, he was playing football there. And in October of that year, he was at practice one day, and he saw his uncles, come to practice. Now, you got to think, he's living out of town, and if you saw your uncles kind of show up at practice one day, what would be going through your mind? It probably wouldn't be anything too good. And so they were there that day to tell him some bad news. They were there to tell him that his dad had been killed on a construction job, all right, up in Tennessee, in Kingsport, Tennessee. He was run over by a cement truck, and that's all they really told him. They didn't really know anymore. But here's the funny thing, not funny, but the irony is they said the biggest thing they could remember, or my dad remembers, is that they told him that it took him 2 hours to extricate his dad from the wheels around this cement truck. So it's a pretty brutal, gruesome kind of fatality. Now, I don't have a personal connection to it, but that's kind of my point. Through the years, on my mom's side of the family, I know my grandfather on that side of the family. I know where he used to sit in the living room. I knew where he'd be at dinner time. I knew what he did in the mornings. I knew a lot about him because I was there. I knew how he interacted with the family at reunions. I have a personal connection with him. But on my dad's side of the family, I've always wondered the same things about my dad's dad. What would he have been like at a reunion? What would he have been like at family vacations or different holidays? I don't have that memory, and it's missing in my life, in my history, because of something that happened at work. Now, you have the power, if you demonstrate that triangle, you have the power to influence memories like that. Because I can assure you, in 1961, the same emphasis on safety anywhere in the country was not as high as it is now. And so your ability to demonstrate the triangle is huge. But things got ironic, I thought. I went to work for OSHA, never dreaming to be a safety person. I just wanted a job when I graduated. And I always thought, well, this is ironic. I'm a safety guy doing safety inspections, issuing citations for no backup alarms on cement trucks, and my grandfather got killed on a job. I always thought that was kind of ironic. My family occasionally would bring that up and say, well, that's kind of weird. I said, well, that's the way it is. I got a job. So they were happy. And so through the years, I thought, well, this is a strange sort of irony. But it even got stranger. In 2004, I went to work for Fluor in a corporate safety role in Greenville, and I was sitting in the lobby waiting on my orientation that day, and I was sitting there thinking, what was going through my head is, guess what? I'm the safety manager, corporate manager for the company my grandfather died at. Because guess who he was working for in 1961? He was working for Daniel Construction, and if you're from South Carolina, you know of Daniel. And Daniel merged with Fluor in the 80s, and so I thought, boy, this is really weird. I'm a safety person at the company when my grandfather died. I don't know if that registers as ironic to you, but it did to me. And so, I didn't really give it much thought after that, but occasionally would think about that connection until about 3 months into my job. Anybody want to guess where they sent me to do a corporate audit? Tennessee Eastman, or up to Tennessee, and at an Eastman facility in Kingsport. All right, my grandfather was killed on a Daniel job in Kingsport, and so I went up there. I think, oh boy, this is strange, because I asked, how long have we been at this site? They said, well, I think that's the early '60s. I thought, man, that just kind of gave me chills. I drove up there, called my dad, and said, you know where I'm going? I said, I'm going to Kingsport to do a safety audit. There was a brief pause and silence in the conversation, and I was really driving safe at this point. And I didn't actually have a cell phone. I was on my way up there. I want to clarify that. Wasn't driving and talking at the same time. But I wanted to make sure nothing went wrong, because I didn't want a second irony to occur. But I thought, well, when I get there, if I get to know people, I'm going to see if anybody remembers or knows anything about that. And so after a couple days, I asked them, told them the story, and said, well, we don't know, but we know somebody that might. They went out on the job. There's about 1,100 people there, and one of them was working in 1961 for Daniel Construction. So they brought him in the office, and they asked him, do you remember this or know anything about it? He said, yeah, I remember it. He said, it did not happen at Eastman, but it happened at a glass plant Daniel was building in 1961. He said, I was on the job site the day it happened. This was 40, 50 years ago. And he said, yeah, I remember what happened. They shut down the job that day. He says, I wasn't there, and I didn't know your grandfather, but I knew he was a carpenter, and he was building forms around a column, and they were getting ready to make the pour around the column, and the guy had to back down a narrow alley to get to it, and somewhere in that process, he got run over. And the weird thing was that he said the same thing my dad had always said. Yeah, it took him 2 hours to extricate him. So that same memory registered with him that had registered with my whole family, throughout time. So when I think about that irony, it was sort of a weird way to close that whole idea about my grandfather, is that, what could have impacted that? I have no idea what the details were that day. I wonder about, should it have had a backup alarm? Should there have been barricade tape? Should they have been working in pairs? Should they did some type of pre-plan? Should they did some type of audit? What should have happened that day? Have no clue of knowing. But what I do know is that everybody on that job, including my grandfather, had an opportunity to influence something. Think about that. You have a power to influence something with your mentality, with your character, with your results-driven mentality. And so what I want you to think about and take away from today is, what do you need to work on? Because the real reality is, yes, we have a lot of frustrations over control and accountability sometimes. But at the end of the day, what is the real benefit of what we do? What we do, in a nutshell, is we create memories for families in the future. Because what happens is, when you keep people from going home dead or hurt, you're able to create that family reunion picture, those holidays, those nights and evenings and ball games, whatever it may be. You create memories for people. And that is a fact that I remember, a fact that registers with me, a fact that registers with my family. And if you're looking for a place to start, just think about the triangle. And your fire can burn hot, it can burn big, and it can be sustained. So I kind of close with that idea, and I really do appreciate the opportunity to talk to a group that, in essence, feels like family in a lot of ways. Thank you.